This is a story that I'm not supposed to be telling. A family secret that I'm not supposed to know. When my grandfather was younger, he became the principal of an elementary school. He was in his late 20s, early 30s at the time, and despite being young, he was a born leader. He was a great principal, and everyone loved him. I can attest to that, as I attended multiple award ceremonies for him, and the respect and admiration he received was crazy. There was a young boy at the school who was having behavioral issues in class, and my grandfather saw that the kid didn't have a lot of parental support, so he called in the kid's father and had a talk with him about spending more time with his son, and just a general parenting session. It turned out that all the boy needed was his dad's attention, and after a few weeks he was a happy model student. Whenever my grandfather would leave school late, he would see the dad playing basketball with his son after he got home from work. It was one of those moments that he took pride in, being able to be a difference in people's lives. However, not everything has such an easy solution, and my grandfather found himself having to deal with an employee, Stanley the janitor, who was showing up to work drunk. Stanley was an alcoholic with a mean streak, and my grandfather tried on multiple occasions to deal with his behavior. One day Stanley showed up so drunk that my grandfather had to send him home, and called the superintendent to let him know that he was going to fire him the next morning after he sobered up. He then warned them to let him deal with it when Stanley was sober, because he was not a stable person. As it goes in these types of stories, the superintendent was furious and decided that he was going to call Stanley himself and fire him, despite my grandfather's warning. No one called my grandfather to tell him about it either, so he was completely in the dark and thought he could deal with it in the morning. Stanley was furious and went to the school that evening. He searched the offices, my grandfather's included, and tore things apart until he finally had what he wanted. He was in a blaze of fury on his way out, and he saw the father and his son playing basketball. He walked towards them and pulled something out of his trousers. It was a gun. He then proceeded to shoot the little boy, killing him instantly. The father was so upset and hysterically crying, but somehow managed to get the gun away from Stanley and shoot him. My grandfather was called to the elementary school immediately by the police because there were 2 dead bodies. The little boy and Stanley were both dead, but what was even worse was the crying from the father and him saying that he couldn't save his son. It was clear that he would never forgive himself for that day. My grandfather was pulled aside by one of the police officers who had searched Stanley for evidence. They had found a list, a hit list of people that he was going to kill, and all of the addresses to those people that he had retrieved when he was searching the offices. My grandfather was number 1 on that list. So if it weren't for that father, it's likely that I would have never been able to meet my grandfather, and possibly my mother and grandmother would have been killed if Stanley had been able to complete his mission. To this day, I get goosebumps whenever I hear that story. It's just so chilling. My grandfather never uttered a single word about this after his initial recount, and my mother made me swear to never tell him that I knew. He carried the weight of that boy's death on him until the day he died. A quick update. I just looked up records online, finally found some information, and spoke with my mother. There was another man who Stanley killed. He had killed another janitor that evening, and he had thought the boy and the father had seen him. So then Stanley tried to shoot the father and wrestled with the man to get the gun. In that process it went off and killed the boy. This happened 2 years ago when I was 19 years old. I'm a traveler by heart, and I love to try new things. I was in China for 2 weeks with a tourist group of about 12 people, and I didn't know most of them, all from America. I knew one guy who happened to be my kung fu instructor, and he was fairly aged, about 37. His dad was a very old man, and also lived in China, and was a very popular man in his town. He was a teacher to the local police force, and even some military. Literally one day before we left China, we visited a clothing shop that was owned by some of our friends. When we got there, we all got free clothing and discounts, so I took off my jacket, which had my wallet and passport, and put it on a hanger. I try on my new clothes and take a picture with my group, and then go back inside. I put on my jacket, and then we head to lunch in our convoy that our instructor's dad set up for us. I ate my food, and then I noticed one thing missing. I'm patting down my pants, my jacket pockets, looking around my seat, when someone asks me if everything was okay. I calmly say, I lost my wallet. Maybe it's in the convoy car? Nothing there. After a few hours, we hear back from the store. They went through the surveillance tape and called us up. They shared the recording with us, and what I saw gave me a slight feeling of anger, and the creeps. Two very well-dressed men were in the store by themselves, just standing there, with no physical interest in any clothing around them. One man is standing a bit near the door, and sort of blocking the potential sight of anyone coming back in and seeing the other man. The other man quickly goes into my pocket, but no one else's pocket or belongings. They just went straight for my stuff. That's what gave me the creeps. I enjoy the last day of my trip, and I am literally walking all over the place to see if I can find that guy again, with his picture in hand. Nothing. The next day my tourist group leaves, and I am forced to stay behind because I have no exit visa or a passport. They all gave me a few hundred yuan, and wished me luck in China as they went into the airport. I went back with my instructor's family, but decided to stay one more night in my fancy hotel before I took my invite to their home. It's late at night, and I'm in the hotel lobby room, which has huge front glass doors and a main street light in front of it. I peer outside, and I swear I saw the guy from the store who stole my stuff drive by and look at me. The next day my instructor's brother, who is an ex-detective, with a good but very small understanding of English, took me to the police department to report the theft. I know, it took us a long time to report this. Soon I was a suspect for staying in China past my visa, so I'm in the department for hours getting my fingerprints checked and my mugshots taken. Eventually they let me leave, and I go to the US Embassy and get my emergency passport. I got my exit visa in queue, but I was told I had to wait 2 weeks before it was eligible and accessible. I figured that was too long to hassle my new friends, so I ended up getting an inexpensive hotel room. By US standards, this hotel room could have easily been $100 a night in a state like New York or California. In China, the currency is a lot different. I only spent $21 a night for HD TV, new bed sheets, a huge shower room, and a $1 breakfast. It did take me a few minutes to get used to the Chinese digital cable, though. I went out and got a new wallet as well with all the money my tourist mates gave me before they left. I also went shopping at a vitamin store and got a discount card, which will come in handy later. It was late at night, and one of the friends I met in China knew I wanted a tattoo, and told me about this cool spot to get inked up, but he told me to never go there without him. So what do? I go without him. This place was in an alley, and looked very similar to a shopping center, but much smaller, if that makes sense. It was 2 floors, and was off a decently busy street, and had a lucrative look to it. The next day I go around early evening, and it's raining a little bit. I enter the building, which has a lobby, and am greeted by a man with a suit and an earpiece. Keep in mind I'm in mainland China, and this man didn't know any English, and I barely knew any Chinese. He looks at me and points me towards the front door. I insisted on staying and say, No, tattoo, as I shake my head. I show him my drawing, and he says something in Chinese with a look of satisfaction on his face, and leads me upstairs. I'm finally led down a narrow hall with other doors into a tattoo parlor room. This room has about 5 people, including a lady with a tattoo gun, and I sit on the sofa to wait for my turn. Thankfully, the lady knows a little English, and we have a decent discussion, and I tell her my situation. As I'm in the chair ready to get inked up, with my buttoned-up shirt off and my short-sleeve white T-sleeve rolled up, 5 men in dirty suits walk in the room and tell everyone something in Chinese, and they all leave. I got up to leave too, but one of the men made a stopping gesture with their hand and asked me to stay. Instantly, I knew something was up. I played it cool, put my folded tattoo sketch in my pocket, slowly put on my button-up shirt, and sat up on the waiting sofa, which was faced towards the front door. One of the men blocks the doorway, one is to my left, and 3 are standing in front of me in a half circle. One of the men has a mean-looking tattoo on his neck and was decently built for a shorter than average person. They all stand there next to me with aggressive body language. Keep in mind I'm 6'4" and a lean 220 pounds. These guys are at most maybe 5'11", and the rest were shorter. They pull out their phone, and it's a translator app. They start asking me for all my money, and where I was staying at, etc. One of them told me, through the app which I had to read, to give me all of my money, or else, or something along those lines. I pull out my wallet and they snatch all of my cash, and still hover over me, like a bully scolding a victim on the playground, obviously trying to intimidate me. They spot the corner of my discount/membership card and tell me to give it to them. I used this moment to ask for the man's phone app, pretending I was agreeing with them that he had put in his pocket. There was a weird brief moment of intense silence as they stood over me like they were planning on jumping me at any second. They showed no signs of letting me leave. As soon as the guy looked down to grab his phone, my heart rushes, I get tunnel vision, and I get up and tackle through them and through the front door. I feel one of them try to grab my shirt, but I use my elbow to shake him off as I hit him. The guy at the door fell into the wall behind him. I sprint down the hallway and hear people yelling in Chinese behind me as they chase me. Down the hallway I see the double-handled door chained and locked. Were they planning on keeping me there? I didn't have time to think that, but I just instantly knew it when I saw those locked up doors. Next to the door was a fire escape, so I go out the window and onto the second floor fire escape. I climbed down the ladder and reached the ground, and took off sprinting down the alley, and almost slipped in a few puddles, but eventually made it to the main street. I went to some public markets nearby, and had no money on me, so I stole a new hat, shirt, and an umbrella. I wanted to look as different as possible. I ended up walking around that evening to make sure I wasn't followed. As I walked around, lots of people would ask me for a photo. I'm 6'4", dark, and had Rasta dreads, a mixture you just don't see in mainland China, so I charged them 5 yuan for a photo. Eventually I had a decent amount of cash, so I got a taxi back to the train station, got back to my hotel room, and took a shower, then went to my friend's house for dinner, and told them the story. During that dinner, my friend told me that was a triad hangout, and I could have easily been drugged and kidnapped. I was in the town of Foshan, China. This event happened in another nearby town. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check the description on information on how to submit your stories. Now for the first story. That story has been verified by the moderators on the subreddit Let's Not Meet. I really appreciate you sharing your family's secret with us, and I could see why your grandfather never wanted to talk about it. This story is absolutely horrifying, but at the same time it's heartbreaking, and unfortunately it's something happening around us every day. Now for the second story. Your friend told you not to go to the tattoo parlor alone, so then you go alone. I'm really happy you got out of the situation. Not very many people would have probably made it out of a situation like that. I'm happy you eventually made it home, but it's unfortunate you got put in this situation at all. It's a good idea for anyone, pretty much anywhere, whether you're traveling or not, to always make sure you keep your wallet, passport, anything important, on your body at all times. You never know when someone's gonna come grab it, and even if you're in your home state, getting another driver's license, as well as all the other crap you have in your wallet, not including your cash, is gonna be a hassle. I hope you all have a very safe and Merry Christmas, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.